Hello again. This is Steve Renfro coming to you from Jackson, Mississippi this time, or just north of Jackson, with former Insurance Commissioner George Dale, who started his professional career in Moss Point as football coach in junior high in Moss Point. Coach Dale, we're glad to have you here. You were my eighth grade football coach. I don't think we won a game that year, but I've known you ever since and appreciate the opportunity to take this video today. You were not only a coach, but you're also a principal and in administration for Moss Point for quite a while before you ran for commissioner. So thank you for being here. Well, I'd like to start off by asking you about how you got to Moss Point. What did the early years look like for you, and what got you to Moss Point?
After playing junior college basketball at Pearl Junior College after I graduated from Prentice High School, and then I ended up graduating from Mississippi College. At Mississippi College, most everybody was either going to be a preacher or a doctor, lawyer, or into teaching and coaching. I knew I didn't want to preach. I knew I couldn't be a lawyer and wasn't smart enough to be a doctor. So I went into education. Well, back then, to get a job, you would go to the annual teachers meeting in April and meet with a superintendent from some of the schools that had an opening. I met with the superintendent of Liberty School, and he said he had an opening for an assistant football coach and world history teacher. I was led to believe that I had the job. I turned down three jobs between April and the end of school. A week before school was out, I get this letter from the superintendent of Liberty Public School. Said, "Thank you for your interest, but we have hired somebody with experience." There I was, 1 week left in school, no job. I was scared to death because I didn't have a job. I had bought a car and I had to make car payments. Tommy Wall, who was one of my teammates on the baseball team, who was from Liberty, ran into me on campus at Mississippi College and said, "George, I've just signed a contract to be the junior high basketball coach at Moss Point and assistant junior high football coach, and I think they're looking for a junior high football coach." I said, "Tommy, where is Moss Point?" I had no idea even where it was. So the head coach at Mississippi College called Bobby Holmes, who was the head coach at Moss Point, got me an appointment. So I drove to Moss Point, came down Highway 90 when they had the old drawbridge down there on Highway 90. I had an appointment to meet with Coach Holmes about a prospective junior high job at 10 o'clock on that particular morning. The drawbridge was stuck. They couldn't get it down, so we were parked there and couldn't move. They had to get an engineer from Mobile. Finally, they got there to do whatever he did. I got to Moss Point after 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I had given up even the slightest possibility of getting that job when I was supposed to be there at 10 o'clock. Well, Coach Holmes had a lot of compassion, and I think he was just looking for a warm body. And so he was offered me the job, and I became Moss Point's junior high football coach. And Tommy and I agreed to room together next door to the First Baptist Church in that garage apartment. And in July the 31st, 1962, I spent my first night in Moss Point, Mississippi. In essence, ended up spending 11 very happy years in Moss Point. As a side note, in the middle of the night, I woke up and I said, "Tommy, get up. We've been here one night and they've already egged our house. It stunk so bad." We got up and walked outside, walked around the apartment to try to find out what in the world was that stinking smell. We went and got back in bed. The next morning we got up, drove down and saw a bunch of cars in front of Parks Furniture Store. They always played dominoes in there. There was a lot of Bob and Bill Parks and the Parks brothers playing dominoes. And we walked in there and said, "We're the new junior high football coaches at Moss Point. What in the world is that smell?" In which they all started laughing and said, "Welcome to Moss Point." So I stayed there 11 years.
Well, that's some introduction. You got a story of the puggy plant and the drawbridge all in one take there. Thank you. Thanks for telling about that. So how long were you the junior high coach?
I coached junior high football for 2 years, and then Coach Mallett was the high school basketball coach, and Coach Mallett had run for a special election for the Jackson County Superintendent of Education job, and he won. And Dr. Marsh, who was the superintendent, called me in and said, would you coach basketball? So I ended up coaching basketball for 2 years, high school basketball for 2 years, and also was the assistant high school coach in charge of wide receivers and defensive backs. Neither one of the positions I had ever played.
So that the football positions there as assistant, that was for high school?
That was for high school.
I see.
So I actually coached for 4 years, and the rest of the time, coached and taught for 4 years, and the rest of the time I was in administration.
So how did you get that start? Where were you first? I guess you were assistant principal first, maybe?
John Williams had been the line coach from the high school, and John had gotten his master's degree, and he was offered a job as a principal at Crossett, Arkansas. And so John left and took that job. I was finishing up my master's at Mississippi College in the summer, and Dr. Marsh called me and said, we want to move you up to assistant principal if you want the job. And so I took the job, came back from Mississippi College, and became assistant principal at the high school, first year under Deg Stouter, and the other 4 years under Gene Stouter as principal, and did that for 5 years.
And then at some point, you were the first principal at Magnolia Junior High. The first year it was a junior high.
The first year they closed Magnolia Junior High and turned it into a biracial school, made it a junior high. It was Magnolia High School, which was an all-black school. Mr. Bullock at that time had become the superintendent. Dr. Marsh had left and moved to another job in another city. And I guess my forte as assistant principal for those 5 years, I was in charge of discipline. And I think Mr. Bullock thought if there's ever going to be any problems, it would be in the black section of town at where Magnolia is located. And so he asked me, would I be the principal at Magnolia Junior High? So I guess in essence, I was the first white principal at Magnolia High School, which became Magnolia Junior High, became. My expertise in that 1 year that I was there, they had some severe problems at the high school. But Moss Point, being a blue-collar town, had a very difficult time of adjusting to total desegregation. Had a number of fights, and unfortunately, Gene Stouter was the principal, who was a good principal, but they gave him an assistant principal, some guy that they moved in from off somewhere else that stayed hid. So Gene ended up having to deal with discipline and run a school, and it really just got away from him because he had no help from his assistant principal. Whereas at the junior high, Mr. Bullock had asked Inez Green, Mrs. Green, who was a guidance counselor, had been there for years at Magnolia. He moved her to my assistant at Magnolia Junior High. She knew everybody. She was the best school administrator that I ever had the privilege of working with.
I understand that. I was taught at Magnolia beginning the year after you left. The second year it was a junior high, and she was my first boss there, and I think a lot of her. She's 104, 105 now.
Last time I talked to her, she was in her 90s, and she still was driving to the Methodist church.
Yeah. She's a good friend of Moss Point. So what about athletics? So you, after you were coaching, you still followed athletics, and you were there as a principal when I was in high school. What do you recall about those years?
Well, when the first year I got out of coaching, and they made me assistant principal, was your senior year, and Moss Point had we had not consistently been a winner in the Big 8 conference for various reasons. But the first year I was out was your senior year. Had a good team, went to the Red Carpet Bowl, and should have beaten Murrah in the Red Carpet Bowl. And we had just a very good team. Surprised everybody. Well, it broke my heart because I told my new wife the former Yvette Beausards, I got out of coaching too quick. Well, the next year they won 3 ball games, and I think they fired everybody. And I thought, I didn't get out of coaching too quick. So actually, as a sidelight, one of the things that I did right after, whenever I was assistant principal, WPMP radio station, Mr. Smith, who owned that station, got the contract to broadcast Moss Point's football game. Well, he had hired a young man by the name of Steve Davenport. Steve now is a very successful businessman, owns the Mississippi Radio News, one of the largest radio conglomerates in the state of Mississippi. Well, Steve was his first job, and he was to do the play-by-play of the Moss Point football games. Steve didn't know one player from another. Now, I had taught them all day, and I could tell by the way they walked who they were. I had to stand up behind the student section at the ball games to be sure nobody was fighting. So Steve would always say, point the number and spot for me, so I'll know who made the tackle or who's running the ball or whatever. Well, then it got to where I got closer to him there in the press box, and he hung the microphone over me, and I ended up being his color man. So for the next 3 years, I actually did color with Stephen Davenport with the Moss Point football team. One of the most fun things I've ever done. Another sidelight of that, we were doing the Laurel football game, and we had done the first half, and we thought he had done a wonderful job of calling the game. And a policeman, this is back before cell phones, a policeman came running up there and said, do y'all know where the Moss Point radio broadcast people are? And they pointed at us. And he came down and said, we've been getting calls. Y'all are not on the air. So we looked down, and Steve blames me and I blame Steve. Somebody's foot had unplugged the wire down there, and we'd broadcast the whole first half of Moss Point and Laurel, and nobody heard us but just Steve and me. We still laugh about our great career as sports announcers for the Moss Point Tigers.
Wow. So my senior year, football year 1966, Bruce James was the star who went on to Arkansas and was an All-American there. And a lot of people were surprised he landed in Arkansas. I think you know something about that story. How did Bruce end up in Arkansas?
From the time that I knew Bruce, which was in the 8th grade, Bruce was a very avid Ole Miss fan. His family were Ole Miss fans. And so it was just a slam dunk that Bruce, everybody wanted Bruce. He made trips to Miami, he made trips to Alabama, Auburn, and everywhere, because being big and fast as he was, they wanted him, but they wanted him as a linebacker. Actually, Bruce played linebacker and offensive tackle until one day our running back got hurt. And at practice, we go out there, and Coach Holmes said, Bruce, you get at tailback. Bruce James had never played tailback. This is in his junior year. They had to teach him how to receive the ball when you handed it off. Well, the first time in running drills, they handed the ball off to him, and he jumped over the linebacker. We looked at each other and said, we think we found something. Well, Bruce, I think at one time was leading the Big 8 conference in scoring. He not only was big, but he was fast. And as you said, he went on to Arkansas. Well, it was a slam dunk that Bruce was going to Ole Miss. Coach Swayze came down and met with him, John Lindsay, and Rainer Shaddles about coming to Ole Miss. And they really just wanted Bruce. Well, Bruce got a call one day from Frank Broyles. Frank Broyles was the head coach at University of Arkansas. And he said, I'm going to be in Mobile such and such a date. Would you and your parents come over, and I want to visit with y'all? So Bruce and his mom and dad go over to Mobile, meet with Coach Broyles. Monday, Bruce comes by my office. I'm at that time the assistant principal. Said, Coach, I'm going to Arkansas. I said, Bruce, no, nobody goes to Arkansas at that time. But Lance Allsworth went, and seemed like somebody else went, but very few. Arkansas has never recruited Mississippi. Interesting, though, that my grandson just got through finished playing 4 years at University of Arkansas. Well, anyhow, Bruce said, I want to play for that man. And so Bruce goes to the University of Arkansas and does quite well. Bruce stayed in Arkansas. He's been a long-time State Farm agent in Little Rock, Arkansas. He has a Sunday night cable television program where they will evaluate the previous ball game and talk about the next ball game. He's big in the Razorback Foundation at the University of Arkansas. It was a good move for Bruce, even though I didn't agree with it and tried to talk him out of it.
All right, thanks for that story. So I understand you played city league basketball while you were employed with the Moss Point school system, and what was that like?
The City Pass School Recreation Department had a very good City League basketball league. We played the whole time I was there. In fact, my roommate played on another team, and I think one night Tommy Wall got 68 points, probably set a record for the number of points scored. But I very well remember the MacArthur brothers. They were a group of brothers there in Moss Point, very well known. They were all on one team, and nobody could beat the MacArthur brothers on whatever team they were on, because they were all good players. So I really enjoyed my time of playing in the City League at the Pass Point. They called it the Pass Point City League.
So your team went to Tupelo one time?
Whenever Moss Point decided, when John Welch became recreation director, he decided, well, we didn't have a city league in Moss Point just as well as they got one in Pascagoula. So we all decided to play in the Moss Point City League, and we played at old Escatawa Gymnasium, because they were doing some work or something on the high school gymnasium, and so that's where the league played, at Escatawa. Well, on our team was Art Haynes, who ended up being the basketball coach at Moss Point High School, and Otis McCrory, another black guy. Well, we heard that there was a semi-pro basketball tournament in Tupelo. And I'm not sure any of us ever even been to Tupelo, but we found out where it was. So we sent in our registration fee in, and we go to Tupelo to play in the state semi-pro basketball tournament at Tupelo, Mississippi, not knowing that they had never integrated that tournament before. So we show up with Art Haynes and Otis McCrory, two not only big, but two very good basketball players. And needless to say, I don't think we ever got a call the whole night. They tried their hardest to foul Art and Otis out, but they held their own, and we did quite well in that tournament. And I think we broke the color line in the Tupelo Independent Basketball Tournament.
Wow, I've never heard that story. That's interesting. Thanks for sharing that. So what else do you remember about actual Moss Point sports and the games? Any particular games stick out for you?
I remember one year, we always had a hard time winning ball games. We would come close in a lot of them. And I think what happened is Moss Point, the white school, they would always have 5, 6, or 7 real good athletes, but there wasn't enough to go with them to really have a very competitive team. And so therefore, we never did really win consistently until that year and your senior year. But then after they put the schools together, and you took the good athletes from Magnolia along with those 5 or 6 good athletes at the Moss Point High School, and they had absolutely a dynasty there for a number of years because of all the good athletes. Well, I specifically remember that, but before they did that, we would always play Loosedale, we thought, as a breather, because you could always beat, most of the year, Columbia, Picayune, and then you try to play somebody else that you could beat, and that we thought was Loosedale. Well, Coach Holmes was going to be sure that we were fired up for the ball game, and so before the game, to go out on the field in this pep talk to the team, he read what we thought was a letter from the president of the Big 8 Conference, wishing us well against Loosedale Rebels or whatever they were. And we got all excited and to telling us that we need to win and wishing us good luck. And we just rushed out there with Loosedale upset us. And I mean, the people in town got all upset about it. We lost to little old Loosedale, which we did. And I asked him one time, I said, Bobby, what is he doing writing you a letter? He said, he didn't write me a letter. I made that up. But it didn't work because we still got beat.
Oh, my goodness. My goodness. So what? Any other players you remember well?
One of them was Wayne Atkinson, Dr. Atkinson. Wayne was a very good end. I think he made from the Big 8 teams. Rabbit Brown, who was a recruiter for Mississippi State, came to Moss Point and met with Wayne and met with Coach White, who had played, assistant coach who had played at Mississippi State, and then Coach Holmes there in the coach's office. And he let us know that we want your boy. When it comes time to sign him, we want Wayne. We're planning on him big at Mississippi State. So we didn't think more about it. And Wayne was going to be an engineer. So he wasn't interested in the scholarships anywhere else because he wanted to go to Mississippi State and be an engineer. Well, the day of to sign, waited at 10 o'clock, no telephone call. Late that afternoon, still no telephone call. So Coach Holmes called Rabbit Brown, the recruiter who had promised Wayne the scholarship, and asked him, we haven't seen him. Well, we've decided we don't need him. Well, we were mad. Wayne was devastated. And so Coach Holmes picks up the phone and calls his good friend, Coach Vann, the head coach at University of Southern Mississippi, and said, were you interested in Wayne Atkinson? And he almost came through the phone and said, oh, we would love to have him at Southern. So Wayne goes up to Southern, plays a very good career in football at Southern Mississippi. In fact, I'm not so sure that he might not have called a touchdown pass against Mississippi State one of the years that they beat Mississippi State. So I very well remember Wayne Atkinson as being a good football player and proud of his career now as a dentist there in Jackson County and Moss Point.
All right. Well, I can't end without asking you about Doug Hassel. I know Doug and you have been great friends ever since you coached him in high school. So what are your recollections about Doug?
When I came to Moss Point as junior high football coach, the first practice we had, the first two people I met were you and Doug Hassel, and Doug's dog named Red. Red followed Doug everywhere he ever went. And I remember when I had y'all getting together for the first practice and doing side straddle hops and exercises and whatever. And when Doug would get on his back, I'd look over there, and that was that dog Red over his back doing everything that Doug had done. So I developed a strong relationship with you and Doug Hassel. Both of you had good careers, but Doug had an exceptional career, not only in football, but he was a good basketball player, good shortstop in baseball, and even high jump some in track. So he actually had four-letter winner. But Doug came out, he had a very good career, particularly senior year as quarterback, but he came out the wrong year. The year he graduated, there were 6 well-known, highly recruited quarterbacks in the state of Mississippi, one of which was Archie Manning, and one of them was the guy named White from Meridian, one from down at Gulfport, Sonny Brown, one of the Browns at Biloxi. So there were a bunch of quarterbacks. So Doug ended up going to Gulfport, at times called Perk, to play quarterback. So he gets there at the same time that I think the quarterback from University of Miami, some guy named Scarborough, transferred to Perk, and so he ends up backing him up. And then Doug had decided that he was coming to Mississippi College. And so in the Christmas holidays, a former classmate of mine, Jerry Foshee, Jerry was on the staff at the University of Richmond. Well, Jerry ran me down, and I was at my parents' house in Prentice, out from Prentice. He ran me down and he said, George, we don't need a first-team quarterback. we need a backup quarterback that has run the pro style offense, which Perk had run, split out and throw the ball a lot, and said, we think we would like to have your boy to come to Richmond. And so I called Doug and I said, Doug, do you have any interest in visiting at the University of Richmond about possibly playing ball up there? He said, Coach, I'll go anywhere that they're going to pay my way. So Doug signs with the University of Richmond and backs up a second team All-American quarterback that I think led the nation in total offense. So we ended up backing it up for 2 years. So I say about Doug, he was the best quarterback that played at the wrong time everywhere he went. But Doug Hassel was a very good quarterback and a great athlete.